It is more than investment. There are plenty of examples where investment alone is not the answer. Look back to 2012. The club needs to play in the Champions League, and it needs to play Champions League football on a consistent basis and be in a position where even if the stars align, they can make an impact at that level. That was Ange Postecoglou talking about Celtic and what the plans are for next season. It's not going to happen every year, he says it might happen every 3 or 4. But hopefully being in the Champions League every year, revenues would start to increase, which gives you the opportunity to then look at different quality of player. You just have to look at that as your endpoint. It's got to be that, because this gives you the basis and the fundamentals of taking the club to the next level. You don't dismiss the Premiership, he said. You want to be champions, but you don't want to be champions just for the sake of being champions. You want the opportunity to grow in the Champions League, and that is where this club has a long history of doing it. He says you've seen in the past with Martin O'Neill reaching the European final. At times getting out the group stages of the Champions League, there comes the growth. Consistently being there. I'm sitting here just now, said Ange Postecoglou, and he said, hand on heart, without being biased of me being the manager, I think we are in a better side than we were 12 months ago. We need to achieve that again next season. That is the goal next year. I want to be sitting here saying that my team is better. That doesn't mean by winning the league by 30 points. It may be a narrow margin. But in football and the way you're playing, the development of the players has to go to another level. Ange Postecoglou has obviously been looking back at the Celtic history. He's been looking back at Seville. He's been looking back at how Gordon Strachan reached the last 16 and Neil Lennon's side beating Barcelona to take 10 points out the group stages and reach the last 16 of the Champions League. The club can do it, and obviously we've not been able to do it in the past few years. But talking about transfers, the Celtic manager also went on to say, he says failing to prepare is preparing to fail, says Postecoglou. He says we always have plans in place to deal with anything that comes our way, including offers for his stars, which could happen this summer. It's not a precise science, says Ange Postecoglou. He says you've got to be predictive. In the January window, we kind of knew that Juranovic and Gorios was going to... Potentially we're going to lose them. They were good players who had contributed to our success. They had contributed greatly. We thought that O and Alistair could both come in. They looked really good players who were younger than the players that were leaving. So potentially you could get a higher ceiling if we got that right. That's always a challenge here. And now on to the next part of the puzzle. It says this is basically going to be like Jenga this summer. But there's been a lot of talk this summer about the Liverpool keeper, Keeler, coming to Celtic. Now there's some crazy prices out there being bandied about for the value of the player, but when you go onto transfer market and you see the way that he's developed through the club, obviously his date of his last contract was 2021. His contract currently expires in 2026, so he does have 3 years on the contract, so it will cost a bit of money, but it has been suggested that he is desperate to leave Liverpool. He obviously joined Liverpool back in 2015 for the youth, and he's worked his way up through the under 18s to under 23s to actually breaking through as backup keeper. But his price has increased, and it's currently said in 2022 the current market value for the player on transfer market is £8 million. I can't see Celtic paying £8 million, but I can see them paying a bit of money, and I think if the keeper wanted to come to Celtic, with him being Irish and everything, I think they could make it happen. Is it there? We have to look back and we look at Bain. Bain had a fantastic first half the other week, but you see his shortcomings. Is Joe Hart up for it at his age? You want to go into the Champions League and have the best level of performance we can, and the way that Ange Postecoglou is building the team, it is a young team, you know, and so he's building. He knows that he can get really good players, and if we've got to pay that little bit more, I mean, the Irish lad that's at Liverpool is 24-year-old, so he is in that age bracket that Ange Postecoglou is looking for. It could be an interesting summer if we do go for him. And then we'll have to talk about this yesterday. The Celtic Trust put out a tweet after the First Minister in Scotland, Humza Yousaf. I think the SNP are doing everything they can to make sure that they alienate football fans once again. They did it when they had the bill out, and the Celtic Trust were one of the ones that really were dead against that, but the Celtic Trust went on to say in a bizarre intervention from the First Minister, Celtic and other clubs have already taken the lead in proactively seeking permission to create fan zones. These requests are consistently knocked back by councils and the police with very little explanation. So over to you, Hamza Youssef. And that's all we're going to talk about politics, because we're always told in Scotland that you've not to bring politics into football, but advertising boards right round stadiums all around the country have advertising for political parties, but football fans aren't allowed to talk about politics. Know your place, as they say. Anyway, back to the main Celtic FC news. Ange Postecoglou is expecting a busy summer. What do you think? Who will be sold? Who will come in for our top players, and who will Ange Postecoglou pull another rabbit out of the hat? Because let's face it, anybody that we've spoke about with being prospective transfers to Celtic, Ange Postecoglou has knocked it back and said that we're wide off the mark. That anybody that's been spoke about so far. Could the Irish keeper be in there? I think we really do need another keeper to come in, because let's face it, Bain isn't Champions League quality. Joe Hart, for as good as Joe Hart is, and he does wear his heart on the sleeve, you know, he is at an age where we really need somebody a bit younger, and we can maybe just get us that little bit further in the Champions League. It's not about getting further in the Champions League. It's just in this year, it's all about putting in a great performance. And talking about performance, I hope you've enjoyed this one today. And on that note, have a great day, Celtic fans all around the world.
Lit. Roll up to